So you just see that coming up as recording soon. I think it's recording now. Yeah. Perfect. Okay. Happy New Year to you as well. Yes, it's the first one that we've done of these sessions in 2025. And it's a shame that our registration link seemed to not work because there was a problem with the website. But I'm glad you managed to get here. That's the important thing. I hope you had a peaceful and joyful New Year. I know it's a really difficult time when you're considering divorce proceedings, your relationship isn't working, maybe you're already in the process of divorce. And I know that that does mean that you're going through a bit of a difficult time. But the hope is that in 2025, you manage to get things resolved and you're able to move forward in your life. And I have got a direct message. Thank you for sending me that. The divorce process has started. So you're already in the process, you're already in on this journey, and hopefully you're trying to learn as much as you can about how this process works. And really that's what these sessions are about, is to give you some knowledge, to give you some guidance, to answer some questions as well. If you've been here before, if you've been on one of my calls before, you'll know that the sessions are around 40 to 45 minutes. Sometimes I go a little over. Initially, I will share some information with you, and then I will invite you to ask me questions if you have any. So today's session is all about what is fair in financial settlements. Lots of you will be looking at sharing your finances. Lots of you will be in this process of thinking about, we've got a certain amount of assets, property, investments, savings, and we don't really know how we share that. And I'll talk you through what the court is looking for. I'll talk you through a little bit about how we look at it and how we bring these settlements together and what is relevant in this process. So I'm really glad that you're here, and I'm glad that you managed to make it despite issues with the link that we shared. Hopefully we'll get that resolved today so we can obviously not have these issues in the future. But I'm glad that you're here. That's the main thing. Okay, so what is a fair financial settlement? Before I start that, let me tell you a little bit about myself. Some of you may not have come across me before. Maybe it's your first time on one of these sessions. It's always good to know if you've been before. But if it is your first time, and maybe you haven't come across me before, my name is Bhavna. I am a family lawyer. I don't practice as a family lawyer now. And I stopped practicing almost after my own divorce. And it was because I felt that practice really wasn't the right way for me to help my clients, help people around me. My divorce was 13 years ago. That's when I made the decision that my marriage was over. And during that time, I really felt that divorce was very different to anything that I expected it to be. I'd helped many, many people through their divorce as a practicing family lawyer. And when it happened to me, I felt like I'd been doing it all wrong. I felt like there was a better way of doing things. But my divorce was, it really mentally affected me and my children. And I felt like the legal process was just one part of what I was going through. There was a whole other part, a whole other support that I needed. I knew the legal process, but I didn't feel that the legal process, just getting help with that through a solicitor would support me in the right way. I managed to do everything myself. Luckily, I didn't need to get anyone to help me because I had the knowledge and skills to do it myself. It did take a few years to get through it, and we tried mediation. We ended up settling financial matters and arrangements for children ourselves. And I was able to get my own consent order drafted and submitted to court and get things resolved. But once that process was over and I started to stabilize and heal, the children started to stabilize through the process. I started thinking about how I could help people. I was back in practice, but it did really feel empty. And I knew that there was a better way of doing things. So I set up my company to help people in a different way. And just giving information, giving knowledge, really bringing, changing how people view the law around divorce was really important to me because people think that it's completely, it's mysterious. And we can make it a little bit easier for people. I can demystify this process a little bit by showing you how things are done. And in that way, you can bring your costs down. Hopefully, you can also manage some of this process yourself. And I'll tell you a little bit about how I work at the end. But let's talk about what is fair when we're discussing financial settlements. So, with finances, when we talk about this word fairness, what we are looking at is your whole situation, because what is fair for this couple that are going through divorce and what is fair for you will be completely different. It is dependent on your circumstances, the needs of both of you, and the needs of the children, if you have any. And how do we look at fairness? Like, how do we look at your circumstances? Well, the law gives us a list of factors that we need to consider so that your agreement is fair and reasonable. These are contained at Section 25. You may have heard of Section 25 of the Matrimonial Causes Act. And so this is where you'll find the list of factors. These factors are applied to your financial settlement depending on your circumstances. And they help you reach a fair financial settlement. And I'll go through them in a bit more detail for you. Most people will come to me and say, well, surely 50-50 is fair. There's two of us, we should just share everything equally. And that isn't always true. Sometimes it is, of course. Sometimes that is the fairest way of splitting everything. But for most people, this isn't true. Sharing your finances equally is not going to give you a fair outcome, especially where maybe one person earns less, one person possibly has given up their job to bring up the children of the family. It wouldn't be fair to share things 50-50. What we are looking at is giving you an outcome that is fair and reasonable. The other thing that people will come to me and say is that, but surely we're only sharing things that are in joint names, and everything in my name stays with me. And actually, that isn't the case either. Anything in your sole name needs to be potentially in the marital pot to be shared. What we look at initially is everything in your name, everything in the other person's name, everything in joint names. And this includes things that are in the UK and abroad. And what we're looking at when we talk about everything is property, savings, investments such as ISAs, any other form of investment. We're looking at crypto, which is a new form of investment, I guess, or way of holding assets. We're looking at pensions. Lots of people forget pensions. I think the figure is around 30% of women usually will not consider their partner's pension. And sometimes a pension can be more valuable than the family home. So that definitely needs to be taken into account. And any personal assets that are worth £500 or more. So possibly cars, shares, anything like that needs to be considered. So there's quite a lot of assets that we look at. Ideally, the court wants you both to be financially independent. And what I mean by that is what's called a clean break, that you are not linked financially anymore. So we share our assets in a financial settlement, and you change the assets' names. So, for example, the family home. Ideally, you don't want it to remain in your joint names. What you want is either for it to be transferred in the wife's name, the husband's name, or sold. Sometimes we do need to keep assets in joint names still, but ideally not. If a clean break is not possible, then the court may not order something like that, because not if for everyone, clean break is not fair. But we have to look at what's fair first and then think about whether a clean break is possible. So I've got another direct message. We have the exchange of financial disclosure on the 17th. I'm a bit nervous. Children are adults, so only this is to be done. So you've got finances to share. Okay, so what is a fair and, oh, we've done this one already. For some reason, we have 2 slides of that. Relevant factors. This is the section 25 factors that I mentioned. These are the different things that we need to look into. It doesn't matter whether a court is looking at your financial settlement because you weren't able to agree how to share everything. It doesn't matter if you have a solicitor doing it. It doesn't matter if you're doing this yourself. These are the kind of things that you need to consider when you are going through a financial settlement and you need to share assets. And I'll go through them. Obviously, we have limited time, so I won't be able to go through them in a lot of detail, but let's talk about them a little bit. And feel free to put your questions in the chat box as I'm going through. You can put it as direct messages, and actually somebody's just done that. So feel free to send me a direct message with your questions, and I'll come to them at the end. So the first important factor here is the welfare of any child under 18. Children of the family are priority, and they will always be considered first. And they are the most important consideration. So what that means is we consider, what do the children need? What is important for them? What meets their welfare needs when we are looking at the finances? So, for example, you might have a situation where one party is the main carer of the children. And in that situation, we have to make sure that that person who is the main carer has a stable home. They can meet their expenses every month, that we are considering how they fund the children, how they can meet the children's needs. Their housing has to meet the children's needs. For example, they may need to live near the children's school. If there is 2 children, they may need a 3-bedroom property. They may need a place that's safe. So we have to consider their needs. We need to make sure that their expenses are affordable to them, and the settlement takes account for these things. So that's why the welfare of the children would be relevant if they are the main carer. So think about how your financial settlement will put the children's needs first. The second thing here is income, earning capacity, property, and other financial resources. And there's quite a bit here. Income, quite clearly, we need to make sure that we have to consider your income when we are considering how to share assets. So if one person has, and I find this a lot, one person will have a limited income. Maybe they work part-time and the other person works full-time because they've given up their work to potentially look after the children of the family, take away the stress from the main breadwinner so that they can concentrate on earning more, and the one that's working part-time can concentrate on taking care of everything else. And so when they go through a divorce, if you just share the assets 50-50, it may be really unfair for them because they can't house themselves on whatever that 50-50 means. They can't meet their expenses because they're working part-time, and it's very hard for them to now increase their income to the right level. So we have to look at income when we are looking at how to share assets. And it might be the person with the lower income needs to consider how they could increase their income if it's possible. So can you take more hours at work? Are you entitled to benefits? Possibly. How can you increase your income? Could a change of job give you a higher income? That's your first responsibility. But once you've done that, it still might be that you need to look at getting a bigger share of assets. Maybe getting child maintenance or spousal maintenance will make that a fair settlement. So we have to consider that. And then we come to earning capacity. Earning capacity is how much could you earn? You may not be earning currently because maybe you had a situation where one person was earning enough and you didn't need to work. You were able to take either a situation where you just looked after the family, you looked after the children because there wasn't a necessity to earn. But when you are separating, maybe you may need to earn. So what is your earning capacity? Sometimes we're in a situation where when you've got assets together, you can both work part-time because there isn't a need to work full-time. Maybe you've paid off your mortgage and you're just both paying bills that children have grown up. Maybe we look at what could you earn if you have to sell the house and you get not enough to be able to buy. Maybe we have to consider what your earning capacity is. What could you earn if you went back to work full time? And we consider that, not just your current income. Property and other financial resources. So you might have a property in your sole name, which ends up not being part of the matrimonial pot. And I'll talk about what that means a little bit later. It might be an asset that isn't there on the table to be shared, but you still own it. And so with that, it might be you're getting an income from it. It might be you could move into it. It might be that could be sold, that might need to help as part of this pot to give their settlement to have enough for both of you to buy. So we have to consider other resources that you might have. And that's this final thing, other resources. Do you have an inheritance that's in your account that you've kept separate? And maybe that's not part of the matrimonial pot to be shared, but maybe you might need to bring it in. Or maybe you'll keep it, but you've got that there to help you out. So these things need to be considered. And that is a little bit more complicated. And so obviously I won't go into it right now, but you may have questions around that. So next is financial needs. What do we need by financial needs, obligations, and responsibilities? So needs are a really big part of what needs to be looked at. And it would include things like housing needs. It includes things like capital needs and pension needs. Housing needs are what do you need to, what housing needs do you have? Do you need a 2-bedroom property near children's school, near your support network? Do you need a 1-bedroom flat potentially? What do you need? We need to consider that. And that is different for everybody. You might have a need for a ground floor property because maybe you've got health needs, which means you can't climb stairs. So we have to consider how your housing meets your needs. Some people would say, well, I need a big property. I've got 3 children, but I need a 5-bedroom. Well, that isn't a need, that's a want. And maybe your wants will be met through your settlement, but we first consider your needs and make sure we can meet your need and the other person's need, and then consider, is there enough to give you extra? It might be that your settlement can give you extra. Capital needs are savings that you need to have in your account. So, for example, if you are keeping the family home and the roof needs doing, and it is a need, it's not just you want to do the roof, you actually need to repair the roof, and the cost is £10,000. We need to consider how you will make that repair. Do you have sufficient money in your account for that? And then pension needs. Pension needs are, what do you need on retirement? Do you have a pension? Is your pension the same as the other person's pension? Or do we need to consider how we equalize your pension provision as part of your financial settlement? So that is looking at your pension needs. So it can be a little bit confusing. Think about what your needs are, write them down. Potentially while I'm talking, think about your needs. how are you going to meet those needs? Obligations here include anything around debts. For example, you might have a loan that you need to pay off. So we need to consider that. We need to consider what expenses you have monthly. We need to consider how you will meet those expenses. And then responsibilities. So responsibilities could be responsibilities for your children. It could be responsibilities you have for a child outside of this relationship. It's still a responsibility, and we still need to consider that as well. Standard of living. I mean, it would be ideal if we could keep your standard of living as it is, but often that isn't possible. So we try and get you to a point where you have an equal standard of living. It's more of a yardstick for most people. They don't have the same standard of living, but we try and look at that as well to try and equalize what your standard of living will be. So coming to age, people say, why is age even relevant when we're looking at your settlement? Well, you might have an age gap, and why that would be relevant would be, how long have you got to work? If, say, for example, you are nearing retirement, it may be that you need more in the settlement because you're not going to be able to have an income that is the same as your current income for too long. You may have less years to put into your pension provision. You also may not be able to get such a long mortgage as well. So we do need to take your age into account. And then we have length of marriage. So length of a marriage is really important in how you share your assets. If you've had a short marriage, say, for example, you've been married for 6 months, and should you be sharing everything in both your names? Well, no, you shouldn't be. We just look at, did you manage to get any assets as during your marriage? Say, for example, you bought a property when you got married. It might be that you share that property 50-50 and you keep whatever else is in your name. It might be that you don't share it 50-50 because that's not fair, because maybe one person put the deposit down. So we have to consider the length of marriage is part of how your finances are shared. If you've been married for 30 years, then it's probably likely that you're looking at a 50-50 settlement, because that might be the fairest way of sharing assets. So we do need to consider that. Generally speaking, when you've had a long marriage, we are looking at dividing assets equally. Any physical or mental disability is relevant because, for example, if your child has a physical disability and they need 24-hour care, it might be that one of you will be caring for that child more than the other. They may need provision for income. They may need provision for carers coming in. Potentially, they might need an adapted home. So these things need to be taken into account. If you've got a health condition, which means you can't work, this has an impact on your settlement. It has an impact on your earning capacity as well. So then it becomes relevant. So we need to consider health, mental disability, physical disability for you, the other person, and any children. So if there is anything like this that's coming up for you, make a note of it because your settlement needs to be adjusted to take account of this. This is a really important one next, contributions. We are looking at financial contributions and non-financial contributions. The amount of people that come to me and say, well, I earned more throughout the marriage, and so therefore, and I contributed financially more, so therefore I should get more out of this when we get divorced. And that isn't actually the case when you are married. The court sees you as partners. They would see that you have both contributed to the marriage. It may be the other person looked after the family, looked after the home, took care of other things while you contributed more financially. And so the courts will recognize a financial contribution as well as non-financial contribution. So the court doesn't like to go through your accounts to see who put what money in. Because again, people will say this to me all the time. Well, if you look through our accounts, you'll see I paid the mortgage every single month for 18 years. So therefore, I should get a greater interest in the family home. It doesn't work like that. The court will not look at who paid what, who paid the bills, who paid the mortgage. They won't necessarily look at that. So it's not relevant. So coming to behavior, again, lots of people talk to me about behavior. Is behavior relevant? And we are looking with finances at extreme behavior. Most behavior won't be relevant. So the other person had an affair. The other person didn't give me love and support. That person made the decision to end our marriage. I was happy in the marriage, so therefore I should get more. It doesn't work like that with financial settlements. You won't get more just because that person had an affair. You won't get more because that person treated you badly. Where that person's behavior has an impact on your finances, that might be different. So, for example, I had a client whose spouse was gambling heavily, and the couple ended up in a lot of debt, and they remortgaged the house for £100,000 to pay off these debts. The husband promised never to do it again. It happened again. The house was remortgaged to pay off the debts. And we got to a point where there wasn't a lot of equity left in the house, and the marriage came to an end. There was a lot of debt again. And actually, she managed to get the property. He didn't get a massive financial settlement because, there wasn't much left after remortgaging everything so often. So she got a bigger percentage of what was left just because of, her needing to stabilize the children. So that behavior was taken into account. Sometimes behavior is taken into account when we are looking at someone who is a genius, for example. So the Amazon founder, Jeff Bezos, he got a greater share of assets in their divorce. I mean, it was a greater share of multi-billions because he was the genius in the family and he'd set up the family's wealth. So he did get more. So if you've made a special contribution like that, you may be recognized as bringing something special to the family. So that could be taken into account. So do you have extreme behavior that you think should be taken into account? If you have a question around that, put that in the chat box. We can talk that through. So that's the Section 25 factors, and I could talk about those in so much detail, but I will move on. I talked a little bit about housing needs, capital needs, income needs, and pension needs. So I won't go through that in a lot more detail because I think there's a little bit more that I could talk about matrimonial assets and non-matrimonial assets, because this is something that people ask about so much. When we are looking at how to share finances, the first thing we need to do is this thing called disclosure. Disclosure is where you both disclose to each other everything in your name. And we look at everything in joint names in this country and abroad. You put everything on the table. We look at the valuations. We look at exactly what there is. And so then we get a picture of your financial assets and your financial liabilities for both of you. But sometimes when we look at this, there will be assets there that shouldn't be part of a matrimonial pot. And the matrimonial pot is the pot that will be shared. So how do we decide what is part of the matrimonial pot and what isn't? So non-matrimonial pot assets or non-marital assets might be things that are fair to leave out. So for example, if you bought a property before you got married, you bought it 5 years before you got married, it might be fair to say that that shouldn't be part of your marital assets because you bought it, you paid the deposit, maybe you paid the mortgage throughout the marriage. It's rented out and that rent went into your account and you never used it for family expenses. You never used it to take money out of it to buy your marital asset, your marital home. You never used it to renovate your marital home. You didn't use it for holidays. So it's completely separate. It may be inheritance that you received that you kept completely separate. So these are assets that potentially could be left separate and would be non-matrimonial assets. So hopefully that helps clear that up. So what do we do? When we are looking at your settlement, we look at your total assets. That's part of financial disclosure. Then we decide what is in the matrimonial pot to be shared. What do we need? What are your reasonable needs? What factors do we need to take into account? Like, for example, where will the children live? What do they need? What's your age? Do you have any health needs, etc.? Is there enough in the pot to cover your needs? Everything you need for housing, income, capital, and pension. If there isn't, we might need to bring non-marital assets back into the pot to meet needs. If what we have in the matrimonial pot meets your needs, then we don't need to use the non-marital assets. So that's really everything I was going to cover. I hope that makes sense. I know it can be a little bit confusing, but it's just trying to show you how we look at this from a legal point of view, so that maybe you could look at it from your settlement point of view. So I'll tell you a little bit about what I do before I move on to your questions. So the best way to work with me is through my program. It's a fixed fee program. Initially, we start off with 6 months worth of support and guidance from me. If you need to stay on longer, then it is possible, but the initial start is 6 months because some people can get things completed in 6 months. I help you with communication with your ex, letters, writing documents. I help you and I review these documents. We do your divorce application. We are looking at your financial disclosure, financial proposals. What could be your potential settlement? How do we make that legally binding? We also look at children and arrangements for children and how we get through this process. So with me, you've got me there day to day, helping you, moving you forward, giving you guidance and support. I'm not acting as your lawyer, but I am there to guide you. So all the questions you've got, I guide you on that. When you get a letter from the other side, I guide you on that and we look at how to draft a letter back. I wouldn't be actually writing them for you, but I would be there to guide you and make sure what you're sending out is correct. I review everything you do. I give you example documents. Say, for example, you need a document as part of your process. I will give you a template and then I will help you adapt it so that we make sure what you're sending out is absolutely correct. And by working this way, you keep control, but you're always guided and supported. But you can keep your costs down. You learn so much about how to do this yourself. You learn so much about the growth through this as well. And so it works really well, and it comes with a supportive community, which is great. And I'll give you an idea of how it works when you are in this sort of set fixed fee program with me. So this was one of my clients. This isn't her name. She has 2 children, aged 17 and 15, and she was working part-time while the children were growing up. So she was in a position that I talked about a lot. Due to circumstances, the main asset was the family home. They didn't really have much else. And she was quite emotional because her husband was an alcoholic and was gambling as well. And through the marriage, obviously, there'd been a lot of trauma, a lot of pain. The children were affected. And when she came to me, she felt really emotional. She couldn't stop crying. She was really scared because she just couldn't see a way out. And she felt really lost emotionally as well. So she came to me and I said to her, don't worry, we will work this out. We will take it one step at a time. And the first step was to start her divorce application. So that's what we did together. And we prepared her for what was going to come. She had an understanding of her rights, how this process would work, how we will take it one step at a time. So we got this done and we got this submitted, and I helped her move through legally through that process. The next step was to actually go through her finances. And what we did was we prepared her for how this might look. And it's really important to get clarity because a lot of fear is around finances. How will it look for me? What will happen? What do I need to do? And so I did that work with her. She felt a bit clearer about how things might be for her. And then we started the process, talking to her husband about the finances as well, to get an idea of what he had in his name. Although we were quite clear about what there was, she was fully aware of it. But we did that process, which is really important. And we reviewed her finances again and made sure that we came up with some proposals that were possible. And that is a whole other work, making sure every proposal you come up with is possible, it's sense checked. We've done the work to make sure we can make this happen. We've looked at your income and expenditure, your budget, everything else. How can we make this work? And with these proposals, we look at the advantages, the disadvantages. What will the court think of that? Is it fair? Will it pass the court's fair and reasonable test? And so we did all this and we came up with one that she wanted to put forward. I was happy with it. It met her priorities as well. And it met all the Section 25 factors that we talked about. So we did all this work and we put it to him, or she put it to him. It took some time through the negotiation. She negotiated directly, but I was there saying, okay, if he said this, you now need to do this. We need to consider this. Is it going to be court proceedings if we can't get to an agreement? Are we going to consider other ways of getting to an agreement? Luckily, after a whole process, we managed to get to an agreement. The consent order was drafted, and actually I gave her a template consent order. From that, she was able to amend it to suit her needs. I reviewed it, it was all correct, and it went to the court. There were some issues around it going to the court in the sense that the court actually asked some questions, which they can do. She was ready because I told her what questions the court is likely to ask. We managed those, and she was able to get things agreed. And she did it in 6 months, just over 6 months. So she managed to get everything done, besides the questions from the court in that time period. So she was able to save a lot of money. The cost of my fixed fee program is 2,500. She believes she would have paid about £20,000 in legal fees if she had done it through lawyers. And she was able to make this process whatever she needed it to be. She really needed it to be gentle because of her husband's addiction. And he was in and out of hospital. We had to be really careful about how we dealt with it. And we were able to control that and sometimes stop, sometimes start it up again when he was feeling well. So keeping control can be really important. And these were the words that she actually said. The stress is over. I became a bit emotional there. I'll come on the call tomorrow to share the news. I hope this gives hope to others. And she was really grateful that she worked with me, and I was really happy to be able to help her. So what does this mean? You can chat with me to see if this is the right thing for you. It's not right for everybody, but if you want to manage this process yourself, keep your costs down, keep control so that you are able to decide on the narrative, the communication, whether you need to ramp it up or keep it amicable. We choose that and we decide on that. So feel free to book a call if that is something that you would like to do to find out more about the program and find out if it's right for you. So Nelma, could you put a link in the chat box there to booking a call? There is my book, and there is a link to the book. I know that our website is down at the moment, so you may not be able to access it. But Nelma, if you could put that link in, that would really help. But it is available on Amazon if you can't get it direct from our website. But here's some details about how you can get in touch. Feel free to follow me on Facebook, on Instagram. I have a YouTube channel as well where you can pick up different information, different talks that I've done as well. And actually, you probably won't be able to read information about the program either right now, which is a bit of a shame. But I'll stop sharing now and have a look at the things that you guys have been saying, because I feel like I've been hiding behind a PowerPoint and I don't get to see them. Okay, let's have a look at the question. Will domestic violence be factored into the settlement? This is a direct message. And again, really important question. Generally, the courts will not take that into account. And I know that's really difficult because it has such an emotional impact, physical impact on you. And you want it to be taken into account. And unfortunately, it isn't relevant to finances most of the time, depending on your circumstances. And obviously, I'd need to know more. Most of the time, it isn't relevant to your finances, but you want it to be relevant somewhere because this is something that you've been through. It can have, if you've got children, it can be relevant to any child arrangements that you'll be making. Took a backseat in life to bring up the children. He is paying the mortgage. Do I still get a share in the house? So if you, when you say took a backseat, did your career take a backseat in life to bring up the children? And I think I've answered this. If one person pays the mortgage and the other person is looking after the children, it doesn't mean that you get a lesser share. In fact, you might get a greater share because your income is impacted, your pension is impacted, your earning capacity might be impacted now because you have stalled your career and now maybe your earning capacity can't be as much as it used to be or won't be as much as your husband's is. So it is relevant, and you will still get a share in the house. Hi, my son is 14 and has special needs, hence I could never work. I've had to take care of him, though he goes to a mainstream school. My husband, too, mostly worked from home and has been the financial provider. Now he wants a divorce and says he can't pay me or share any assets with me. He wants to kick me out of the house. He says I have a lot of property that I will inherit from my parents, as I am the only child and need not pay me a penny. Is that a fair settlement? Absolutely not. That is definitely not a fair settlement. There's so many factors there. So the first thing is taking account of your child's special needs. He's still dependent on you. He may be dependent on you for a long time, even after 18. So you have to take your son's needs into account. That has an impact on you massively and your earning capacity. It may be that you will have to care for him a lot more. Your income has been impacted. You don't have an income. You are reliant on your husband while you are caring for your son. Your earning capacity, you don't have an earning capacity right now because of that. It may be possible when you are living separately that you could get some benefits to help you. But that is part of your income, paying your monthly expenses. So you could get benefits to help you. You are likely to get child maintenance from your husband to help you as well. So those things will meet your expenses. The assets that you have, it doesn't matter whose name they are in. It doesn't matter who paid the mortgage, who was the main breadwinner. You will need to get your needs met because of your son and because you don't have a possibility to get a mortgage, for example. So you will need to get your needs met and you need stability for your son's sake. So he's saying he can't pay you or share the assets. Well, that isn't going to be a fair settlement and no court will accept that. You shouldn't be kicked out of the house. Even if the house isn't in your name, you have an interest in it. So therefore, you should not be in a position where you get kicked out. And future inheritance is not relevant. You don't have it right now. You may never get it. Your parents might write you out of their will. And you may not get it for another 30 years, for example. So that would never be relevant. So no, that is not a fair settlement. Feel free to contact me. I think you need to get some help with working out exactly what you need to do. If I have my mother with me, who is not a resident here, but now has BRP card and has a stroke and needs care, hence I have limitations, will that be considered with fairness, with me not being able to work at my potential? I'm self-employed. The problem is it's unlikely. We are looking at children's needs. If you know your mother's needs may not be relevant to your financial settlement, your husband or wife potentially would think that was really unfair for you to say, well, I need more out of the settlement because I'm looking after my mother. They wouldn't think that that was fair. So your earning capacity would need to be taken into account. If only one person has pension and the other person purposely didn't enroll for a work pension, should one person's pot be still shared? Yes. It depends on your circumstances, and everything I say depends on your circumstances, because we're only looking at one element here. So should that person's pension pot be shared? Well, if that person didn't enroll for a pension, so they didn't pay into a pension, it's likely that they saved more money. So for example, if they could have paid £100 into their pension, that £100 should be in their savings. So their savings are being taken into account. Therefore, your pension pot should be taken into account. So hopefully that helps. But it is part of a full plan that we need to come to. And I'll take this as my last question just because of time. Are assets earning after separation considered part of the marital pot? My ex is arguing that they should be ring fence. He earns 20 times more than me. He was a breadwinner. Well, it depends on your circumstances, to be fair. So we need to consider your circumstances. If you were separated, say, 10 years ago, it may be slightly different to if you were separated 6 months ago and you're still trying to settle everything as part of your marital pot. So yes, if things aren't resolved and they are still earning, then I would say yes, if it is a short term. Okay, I've only got one other question, so I'm going to answer it quickly before we finish. There is an occupation order and a non-molestation order in place due to domestic violence, and my husband had to leave the home that I owned solely. I live with my son, and he has refused to pay any child maintenance, doesn't pay anything for their family home since September. How will this be factored into the settlement? So this is quite a difficult one and quite complex, so it's going to be difficult to answer it completely. But as part of your occupation order, you could have got an order to say that he paid some part of your mortgage, some part of or even all of the mortgage. Child maintenance should be dealt with by the child maintenance service, so contact them. They will make a calculation and they will enforce it if he doesn't pay. Now with the mortgage, there's nothing to say that he has to pay it to you, or that he has to pay half, or he has to contribute. Really, these things have to be agreed between you. If nobody pays the mortgage, obviously it's in your name and it will affect your credit. And so therefore it's important that you pay the mortgage. As part of the financial settlement, he might say, well, you live there and I've got a rent now, so I can't afford to pay that mortgage. You live there, you have to pay it. It's not always factored in. Sometimes it is, but it depends on circumstances. So I hope that helps. I'm going to dash now, but lovely to see you all. And I'm glad that you managed to get on despite our tech issues. These will be running every week on a Wednesday. We've got some different subjects coming up. So mediation, we've got sessions on child maintenance, how to divorce on a budget, all sorts of things, how to keep control of your divorce. So really interesting topics coming up. If there are any topics that you want me to talk about, let me know, because it's really good to find out from you what you want to hear about, so that I can bring these to you. So yeah, definitely let me know if there's anything that comes up for you. Come along next week. I hope we manage to get our tech situation sorted out, hopefully today. And see you very soon. Reach out to me on Instagram, follow me on YouTube. If you subscribe to the channel, you'll hear about all the different things that I'm doing and I've got coming up as well. So feel free to go there and subscribe to the channel so you always find out what I'm up to. Great to have you here. You take care and see you very soon. Bye-bye.